Are you feeling lost in your career, or you want to have a greater impact but you don't know where to start? Welcome to Kinda Planned, the podcast where we help you unlock the opportunities that you can't plan for. Through engaging conversations with expert guests, we help you unlock the mindsets, strategies, and tools that you need to build the career of your dreams. So subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Alex Cuttiford, and let's take a moment to unlock your next opportunity. Well, welcome back to Kinda Planned. This is the first face-to-face episode I've done, Declan, so really excited to have you on.
I'm honoured, I'm grateful.
I've got Declan Edwards, otherwise known as that happiness guy. I'm really keen to dig in today to discuss happiness with you.
Yes, it's my favourite topic to talk about.
Exactly. All right, well, let's get into it. Do you maybe want to first share, I guess, a bit about your career journey and what's led you to what you're doing today?
Yeah, I feel like my career journey is a mess, to put it simply.
Nice.
If you asked me for most of my life whether I was going to be a happiness researcher and run a happiness college, the answer would have been no. I didn't even know that was an option or a possibility for most of my life. I was the kid growing up who, I feel like every term of school I changed what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be a pro athlete playing basketball, of course, when I was younger. I wanted to join the military because my dad had done his whole career in the military. I wanted to be a paleontologist, and I wanted to study history. And I was always trying to chase, what is my thing? What do I care a lot about? And what that led to as I was sort of finishing up high school and getting ready to go into university was I went, okay, at my core, I think I want to help people in some way, shape or form. And at the time, I'd scored relatively well in English at high school. So I went, okay, well, maybe I can help people by being a journalist. And so my first year of university was actually, this is a nice round way, obviously, where we're filming at the moment, was with the University in Newcastle. And I was studying journalism and I was writing positive news. And there was a passing comment by one of our lecturers who was running our shoots who was like, hey, as a heads up, there's a bit of truth to the saying, if it bleeds, it leads in media. Which means if you want to be a respected journalist and have a long-term career in journalism, you're probably going to need to focus on what's going to get front page news. And that's not normally going to be good news. I remember thinking at the time, I was like, I don't know if I want to dedicate my career to that and to elevating all the bad things that happen in the world when there's so much good happening in the world. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll do something else. So I changed my degree after the first year and I went, okay, well, where else can I help people? Health. I'll do nutrition and dietetics. And so I went and switched over to nutrition and dietetics, started studying that, did my diploma in personal training and in fitness, and ran a relatively successful little business there for a few years whilst I was studying nutrition and dietetics. 3 years go by and I'm at the last year of completing it and I'm staring down the barrel of, okay, most likely my career path in this space is going to be working in the hospital system, which is nothing wrong with. It's just not something I was passionate about or wanted to do. I was staring down the barrel of, a year of placement, going, do I want to pursue this? And again, found myself going, I think I'm getting closer, but this isn't quite it. And so on reflection, I went, well, the part that I love most about the work I've been doing in the physical health space has been behavioural change. It's been emotional health. It's been mental health. I'd like to learn more about that. And at the time, I'd found out about positive psychology, the field of studying happiness from a scientific lens. And there was a postgraduate program being offered by Central Queensland University. And their recommendations page said, highly recommended that you have an undergraduate degree in either education, I think it was allied health field, or social work. And I went, I think business was the other one that they were open to as well. And I went, okay, well, I'm 3 years in. Am I going to do this fourth year, have nutrition dietetics, then I'll do the postgrad? And I remember going to one of my career advisors at the time at the uni and saying, I don't think I want to finish this degree, but I don't know what my options are. And she said, you can take an early leavers degree. You can take your 3 years, exit, go do some future study elsewhere. So, well, what would that give me? And she went, you'll have a Bachelor of Health. I went, that's what I need to get into this postgrad program in positive psych. And I'm always reminded when I look back on my career path, I'm reminded of that Steve Jobs quote where he said, we can't connect the dots of life looking forward. We can only do it looking backwards. Yeah. And I look back and go, all of this had to happen to lead me to finding out about this field of research, to fall in love with it, to spend close to the last 10 years of my life now studying it and really building my whole career around how do we study and understand happiness from a scientific lens and then teach people the skills and science of happiness to try to make the world a little bit happier. And
it's such a great story. And it's why this podcast is called Kinda Plan. Because you can't map the whole thing out. It's often not until you're looking back and you realize all the different pieces that have come together and you've started, you've shifted and you've changed and you've tried different things and it didn't work out, but that sort of opened up these different opportunities that you've then looked down, and then you end up shaping this thing and you're like, I couldn't have planned that better if I tried, but you're exactly where you need to be.
Yeah, spot on. And I think in retrospect, I can see that all of those chapters and all those steps throughout my career were shaping me into who I needed to become to really make the most out of this opportunity and to build something meaningful and impactful. Like, I had a lot of growing lessons to do. I hope I still do, right? Like the way I approach my career now is fundamentally different than how I approached it even 3 years ago, let alone 5 or 10. Yeah. And I hope if we were to have this conversation again in 10 years' time, I'd go, yeah, I've learned some things.
Yeah.
My approach to my career and my life has changed a little bit.
So what does happiness mean to you now?
Yeah, so look, this is a big question because we as a species have been wrestling with the definition of happiness for like 3,000 years. Yeah. And I decided I was going to be the guy who came out and tried to solve that. Yeah. After 3,000 years of debate, why not be the guy who goes, this is what happiness is? So I'll say first and foremost to everyone listening, I've come to believe that there is no singular definition of happiness that's going to work for 8 billion people on the planet or singular approach to happiness. What I do fundamentally believe for myself now is 2 things. One, happiness is an umbrella term, which means there's emotional nuance underneath it. I think we often make the mistake of thinking happiness is just a fleeting feeling like joy or excitement, but happiness can also be expressed as contentment, peacefulness, pride, accomplishment. There's all these forms of happiness that sit under the emotional umbrella term that is happiness, and then there's all these other beautiful emotions underneath it. And the reason I like that is it gives us the ability to have emotional nuance and to experience happiness sometimes in surprising places. I know I was talking at a conference recently where I was delivering a keynote, and I said, think about some of the most challenging times in your life. Chances are there were moments where you felt resilience and grit during them. That's a form of happiness. Think about times of great grief and loss and suffering. Chances are there was moments of connection and support. Those are expressions of happiness. So first and foremost, when I think of happiness, I think of it as an umbrella term, not a singular fleeting feeling. The second way I think of happiness now is that it's a skill set. So all these skills that have previously been called soft skills, we try to call them human skills now. I call them happiness skills. They're the skills that are associated with living a much happier, more fulfilling life. Things like emotional intelligence, self-awareness, compassion and empathy, communication, like these real human skills.
Yeah, I think of it as human capabilities is
love
the
it.
language,
Yeah, love it. And so when I think of happiness now, I go, okay, yes, it's this emotionally nuanced, complex thing, but it's also something that I can learn and that I can practice and I can get better at. And inevitably, like any skill, it's something I'm probably going to stuff up a lot of times and make mistakes with and stumble and fail for a bit. I think of it now almost like learning a language, right? You're not going to learn a language overnight. It is consistent practice over the long term. But eventually, bit by bit, you start to get a little bit more fluent with it. My hope, I think what I've dedicated my career to now is how can we help people become fluent in the skills of happiness? I just think that makes a better world.
That for me, like in hearing that conversation, I think what that does for me is it takes the pressure off being happy.
Yes.
Because people are like, we're in a culture that's obsessed with happiness whilst also like doing everything possible to make that as hard to experience. And part of it is because we sort of have this pressure on ourselves to be happy, which is just so counterintuitive to actually experiencing the things that we're actually hoping or what we actually think is happiness. Opens up this space for, I can still experience happiness in the middle of grief.
Yes.
I can still experience happiness when work is hard, when life is hard, when everything isn't turning out exactly how I hoped it would. There is still a way for within that to recognize that I'm still in a state of happiness rather than thinking everything is lost now because I'm not experiencing an ecstatic emotion of what we might typically call happiness.
Yeah, it's this idea that I think we often make the mistake that happiness only exists in the absence of difficult emotions or difficult experiences, and that's so far from the truth. We know that from the research, we know that from lived experience. Maybe this is my 3 years of nutrition and dietetics training coming out in me, but I often say like happiness has a role on the plate, but it's not always going to be the main dish.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so when you're putting together a meal, it's happiness in some shape or form is going to be part of every chapter of your life. It just might not be the main course or the main focus. You know, when you're going through a time of grief, I'd be lying to say that like happiness is the main thing at the front. No, grief probably is, but there's little glimmers and elements of happiness. And I'm glad that this approach and this definition, you can see sort of like alleviate some of the pressure. Not only from that angle of like, hey, it's, you know, we don't have to be fully happy all the time to be happy. We can experience it anywhere. But also, as I mentioned with the skill set side of things, you're going to stuff it up. Like so many of the skills, I've been learning this stuff for 10 years and I still have days where, you know, my own inner critic or imposter syndrome will get the better of me, where the way I deal with my emotions probably isn't the healthiest. Like we're all learning and working on it. The difference is I've just worked on it for 10 years now. So I'm probably a little bit better at it than someone who's worked on it for 1 year. Yeah. It's the same as if I was learning an instrument. If I've practiced the guitar for 10 years, I'm going to bet that I'm probably a little bit better at the guitar than someone who's been playing guitar for 1 year. Yeah. Same with learning these skills.
Yeah. So what are the skills? What are the skills that someone could sort of start to actively work on to cultivate happiness in their life?
I mean, there's a lot. At BU Happiness College, we teach 70, which obviously in one podcast we don't have time to go through all of them. Yeah. I've been reflecting a lot more recently on what are the most important ones to start with. First and foremost, emotional intelligence. And we can always break that up in and of itself. Sometimes I think emotional intelligence isn't a standalone skill and it's almost too vague as a skill. Everyone talks about emotional intelligence being good. I start breaking it up more into like emotional awareness and literacy. Can you recognize and name your emotions? Into emotional acceptance. Can you then accept them rather than wrestle with them? And into emotional management. Do you have healthy ways of processing your emotions, working with them, and feeling them? Yeah. Right. So that would kind of all sit under the emotional intelligence banner. I think the other skill that I see a lot of people dramatically wrestle with and struggle with, and it makes sense why, is the skill of introspection. So looking inwards at our thoughts, our feelings, at ourselves, understanding ourselves better. I think part of that is we do live in a society now where so much of our attention is drawn outwards. Our attention is an entire economy. Like some of the world's wealthiest companies are built on the fact that they have our attention. Yeah. You know, social media, all the streaming platforms, news platforms, they're built on an economy of attention. Yeah. And so I think we're trained to kind of look outside of ourselves. And whilst that's useful, I'm not saying, you know, be a hermit and just sit under a waterfall and meditate every day and look within yourself. Yeah. I do think we need a little bit more self-reflection and introspection. So how we would do that, a few tangible skills, any form of meditation and mindfulness, very well evidence-backed for helping us understand our inner world a bit better. Any form of journaling, so getting our thoughts and feelings out of our head and onto paper where we can see them with clarity. I much prefer speaking my thoughts through than writing them, so I use, there's an app called Otter where you can just talk through what's on your mind and it'll transcribe it for you, like a little journal. It's free, it's great. And when we have the ability to kind of look inwards, we start to realize that we're actually a little bit more intelligent than a lot of us give ourselves credit for. A lot of the time we do have the answers, and there's so much of my work in coaching is like, sure, I may be seen as an expert in the science and skills of happiness, but I'm not an expert on you and your life. I never will be. And so when we work with people, I'm like, you're the expert on you. And chances are you have good answers inside of you. We just need to figure out how to get them out. And so I think starting with those two, like get really familiar with your emotions and get really familiar with yourself. Like understand your thoughts, your feelings, your values, your character strengths. Know what makes you tick. Because so often people say, you know, they'll come to the college or they'll come to me and they'll go, hey, I want to be self-confident, I want to have self-esteem, I want to have self-worth, I want to be self-compassionate, I want to have self-care, which are all valid goals and pursuits, but they all start with the same word for a reason, which is self. Yeah. And so when people come to me and say, I want those things, and if you're listening to this and you go, yeah, I would like more self-love or self-care or self-compassion, I go, tell me about yourself. Because how can you have deep, deep love and care or a strong relationship with someone you don't even know yet? If you've not done the work to get to know yourself, how do you ever hope to have a good relationship with yourself? It's like we're trying to jump ahead to step 2 before doing step 1. Yeah. So if I could clip my fingers and people just did those 2 as a starting point, and if I was to give it 3, just because 3 is a nice number to round out with, practicing appreciation and gratitude more openly. I know that can seem a bit airy-fairy. I know when I was learning about the science of happiness and how impactful gratitude is, I was like, oh yes, gratitude, here we go. Everyone does #grateful on their Instagram or whatnot. Like, what's it actually mean? Just the act of training our brain to notice what's good in the world and good in ourselves and good in life is so profoundly impactful to our happiness. I think because our brain is wired a little more towards looking for what's wrong. You know, the classic example is 10 things go well at your workday, 1 goes badly. Which one do we remember at the end of the day? Yeah. The one that went badly. That's what we obsess about. I think it's because our brain doesn't really care if we're happy. It cares that we're alive. Yeah. So it's, you know what I mean? Like, which is weird. As a happiness researcher, I'm like, your brain doesn't really give a damn if you're happy. We need to train it to do that. Yeah. And so, of course, it makes sense that our brain goes, well, what could go wrong? What's the threat? What do I need to do better? Because it's trying to keep us alive and safe. We love it for that. It's just not very conducive to living a fulfilling life. So other than getting to know your emotions, getting to know yourself as the first 2 really important skills, the third would be train your brain to look for what's good. When something goes well, say thank you. Mean it. Show more appreciation to people. When you're noticing all the things that, you know, happen in your day, actually take a moment to go, I'm proud of myself for ticking off 9 out of 10 things on the to-do list, rather than obsessing about the one that you didn't do. Right? If we can just practice that a little bit more, eventually our brain starts to seek it out proactively rather than just reactively. Yeah.
I remember reading that when I was working in youth work, and I was reading a book on youth mental health, and it was essentially saying the number one factor for whether a young person is going to have positive mental health outcomes is whether or not they can see the world through a lens of gratitude.
Wow.
And yeah, that was really powerful, this realizing. And it's one of those things, and particularly when you're thinking about a young person, like, you know, you're getting influenced by all these things, you're sort of being shaped by the world around you. And so the ability to have people around you, and obviously, and if you're going through challenging circumstances or trauma as a young person, that can present so many challenges to being able to just see the world with a lens of gratitude. But if you can get to that place and cultivate the environment around you that allows you to, and if you can find ways to, even through challenges, still have a lens of gratitude on the world, it's just setting you up for all the other things that you want to see. It's sort of like the first domino for positive outcomes in life, I think, can come through this first being able to have that sense of gratitude for where you're at.
And gratitude can seem really like daunting and overwhelming, but we don't need to overcomplicate it. Something as simple as like, I know one of the best positive psychology interventions we know of is the 3 good things list, where at the end of the day, you write down what are 3 things that went well today and why am I glad they went well? Yeah. That's such a simple, free tool to have such a profoundly positive impact on people's mental health and on their happiness. Sometimes you can even go more profound. I remember recently I had a conversation with a graduate of BU, and we were talking, and he shared with me, he goes, hey, have you ever stopped to realise how wild it is that we are living a life currently that throughout human history, 90% of royalty could only dream of? I mean, what do you mean? He goes, well, think about it. Entire wars were fought over getting access to spices to season your food. And now we buy it at the shops for $2 to have in a little shaker can. Yeah. Like, wars happened to get that. Like, royalty for years had bland food. I feel so sorry for them. Yeah. Right? And here's me having my lovely seasoned dish. Yeah. It's inspired by Japanese and Korean cuisine. Yeah. I didn't even have to go there, right? It was just here. And even simple things like the medicine we have access to, the fact that I can have a hot shower on demand, like that's not even a perspective builder for like, wow, most people throughout history didn't get that. So many people today don't get that, right? Like, it seems like such a silly thing to practice gratitude for, but if we don't practice gratitude for it and build perspective with it, we take it for granted. And I just worry if we run the risk of taking so many good things in life for granted, all we have left to hold on to is the bad things. So, practicing that perspective building, I think, is useful.
Absolutely. So this podcast is all about supporting people in their career, helping people take ownership of their career. And I talk about ownership in the sense of we don't control our career. There's all kinds of things that happen that we don't get to influence. We don't get to choose a good or bad boss. And so how do you apply this to the career lens? When someone's looking to, particularly a lot of people are trying to find happiness through their career, possibly a pitfall for people if they're pinning everything on their career. So how do you see this conversation and applying to the career space?
So I see a couple of things with it. First is happiness has a meaningful and important role in our careers, but I agree with you, if we hinge all of our happiness on it or gamble our happiness on it, very risky business. I've met and coached a person who would be seen as remarkably successful in their career and financial life, but it came at the cost of happiness and fulfillment. And I think success at the cost of happiness, in my opinion, is one of the most common and greatest failures that we can experience in life. To look back on our life with the regret of going, okay, I achieved success, but at what cost? I didn't actually feel happy or fulfilled in my life. Now, I'm not saying don't pursue success, don't be successful. I'm saying do it in a way where happiness fuels success. So first, we need to understand that for many people, our relationship between those two things is backwards. So many of us fall into the trap of believing, it's called the I'll be happy when trap, the hedonic treadmill. And it's a fundamental belief that happiness is an outcome of success. When I achieve X job, when I get X promotion, when I make X pay rise, when I move to X role, then I will be happy. But then we get there and we celebrate for all of 3 minutes? And then we're looking at the next goal, right? There's a guy called Sean Aker. He was the head of happiness research at Harvard for a while. He wrote a great book called The Happiness Advantage. And his team found that the relationship between success and happiness is actually much better done completely in reverse. If you focus first and foremost on how do I cultivate becoming the happiest version of myself. Now, when I say happiest version, again, like we said before, it doesn't mean you're happy all the time. I'm definitely not happy all the time. It just means you've built the skills of happiness, right? So I focus on building the skills of happiness. What happens as an outcome? What they found, crazy results. Salespeople who built these skills of happiness generated 37% more sales than people who hadn't. Employees who built the skills of happiness were 12 to 20% more productive than people who hadn't. Right? Like there is this weirdly competitive advantage, not only to you as an individual in your career, but to your workplace, when you have a team of people who have built the skills of happiness. Really good things happen down the line. And I think organizations and leaders are cottoning onto this, because if you look at for the last 20 years, the most in-demand skills that workplaces are looking for and asking for, it's less and less the technical skills. Don't get me wrong, technical skills are important for a job. I was doing a keynote talk recently for our healthcare system, and I said, if I'm going to get surgery done, I do want to know that the surgeon has the technical skills to do that well. I don't want him to just be an empathetic guy with really good introspection, right? And gratitude. I'm like, you're a great person who's got the skills of happiness. I do need you to know how to do this surgery. Both are important. But more and more organizations are going, hang on, the people who tend to be more resilient, more innovative, more adaptable, who make a better positive impact, who exceed and excel in their career, are the people who have built these happiness skills and these soft skills. There was a report done quite a while ago now by Harvard Business Review that suggested that 80 to 90% of someone's outcomes in their career were directly influenced by their level of soft skill development or happiness skill development. But only 10% of traditional learning and development budgets goes into focusing on those skills. 90% of learning and development budgets goes into how do we teach you the technical skills to be a better employee. What I'm arguing is we need at least 50%, I'll settle for equal, 50% of learning and development budgets, be it from your company or from yourself if you're investing into your own learning and development and growth, at least 50% of it should be not just how do I learn the skills to be a better employee, how do I learn the skills to be a better human being? Because everything will flow from that.
Human first, employee second. Yes. And it's I often think about it because you often look at particularly the employer space and it's a fear-based response, right? You're like, they just so desperately want to get to the thing that they want to get to, and you sort of skip over the fact that this is a person, not a robot doing this job. And if you can just keep building that person up, make them feel safe in their environment, make them feel supported. Yeah.
And well, I mean, speaking of this as a person, not a robot, I mean, for now, we're seeing the artificial intelligence and machine learning revolution that's happening now and disrupting entire industries. I'm excited for it, which is a weird perspective to take. But the reason I'm excited for it is if you go back, let's pretend we've got a time machine in the studio. We're going to jump back about 100 years. Let's go like early 1920s. The vast majority of the workforce, particularly in Australia, was employed in what I like to call work of the hand. You know, it was farming and agriculture, it was factory development, you know, it was work that was laborious, it was manual labour. Vast majority are employed there. Then we start to develop a service-based and knowledge-based economy, and we start to move from work of the hand to work of the head, which is like being a specialist, knowing your field, maybe managing people, and the vast majority of our workforce starts to become employed in work of the head. I think we're coming into another revolution, almost like another industrial revolution. But this time, my hope is the outcome is it creates space for the majority of the workforce to be employed in work of the heart, because already artificial intelligence and machine learning is getting better at work of the head than any of us will be. And this is early days. 5 to 10 years, most industries are going to be heavily disrupted and impacted by that. And if you try to compete with it on knowledge and logic, you're fighting a losing battle. There's no way we can compete with it. And so what we can compete on is, again, work of the heart, work that makes us distinctly human, work that at the moment artificial intelligence and machine learning can't do incredibly well, which is deep human connection, which is all these skills that we've spoken about, which, surprise, are also the skills associated with living a happier life. So my hope is the more people invest in that, A, not only does it make a better society, B, they stand out in the work field. They actually accelerate their careers.
Yeah, because you're not nervous about the AI.
Right.
It's like, sweet, I got that tool to do that bit. Yeah. I'm still a person and I've got a whole lot to offer, rather than just seeing yourself as the skill set of a very particular thing that now AI can do 10 times better, and you're just trying to like shut it down, and you're freaking out because of it, instead of just going, all right, sweet, that takes a whole lot off my plate. I'll engage with it. I'll use it. And also I'm going to use those human skills to consider it and think about what are the ways that I don't want to use this. Like when I think about AI, I think it's great for the productivity side of things. Where I hope it doesn't continue to go down is the piece of imitating humans and that space. Even I was talking with my brother a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about how his nephew or someone came up to him and they was like, oh, I can't wait to introduce you to my friend and stuff. It was an AI bot thing that they're like, is their best friend now and stuff. And he was like freaking out, going, oh man. So there's going to be all these things that we need to try and navigate. And we're going to need that human ability to connect with self and to be able to support other people, like, and young people going through this technological change. We need to be able to support them through that and help them. How do they connect with self when they're growing up in a world of technology that's just so far beyond even what we grew up with? And we've grown up with the internet, and you think about it's why generation gaps are widening as this technology takes off and stuff. So one of the things that I started trying to do for my career was running opportunities through the filter of my values rather than the filter of my goals. Okay. And that was, I guess, my way of trying to stay connected with self. And particularly when you think about this idea of so many opportunities come your way. And if we're running everything through the filter of the goal, then we're shutting down all these things that, well, maybe that would have been a great thing to you. Maybe it wouldn't have been. But to prevent getting to that place where you have the midlife crisis at 50 and you go buy the Ferrari because you've look at your life and go, how did I end up here? Yeah. Well, that was someone that maybe they weren't paying attention to their values throughout that journey. They've got caught up in the goals and the hustle and what they thought success would be and stuff. So, yeah, that's where I've come to.
Yeah, which I'd 100% back. I think it's the difference between intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, like what drives us. I've got no problems with having external goals. Yeah. Right? I've got big external goals. I think it's a good thing to have. What I care about is making sure that they are deeply connected to something internal and intrinsic that aligns with me. Yeah. I had a friend once say to me, what she was saying, she's like, we set these goals to climb the career ladder as quick as possible, and we never stop to question whether the career ladder is leaning up against the right wall or not. And you get up the ladder and you put all this effort in and you're like, I didn't even want to be here. I'm in the wrong building. You never questioned it, right? Yeah. That risk is reduced when your external goals are deeply connected to something internal. Values are the best way we have of giving a short, concise framework. And when we talk about values, you're doing it perfectly. Values should be used as a decision-making tool and a behavior-informing tool, not just as a concept. Right? And someone's like, oh, these are my values. My values are family and integrity. I'm like, okay, if I followed you, not in a weird way, if I was some all-knowing spectre that was present in your life for the next week or two, would I see that in your behavior? And if not, we need to ask whether those are actually your values, right? Would I see that inform how you make decisions day to day? And if not, we need to question it, or whether we're just saying it because it sounds right. And the work of uncovering your values, my, that takes time. I remember quite a few years ago, I was at a half-day event with Brené Brown, who's one of my favorite researchers in this space. Yeah, incredible person to check out. And she was saying her standard is to help people get to the point where they can define their 2 core values that are ever present in every part of their life. 2. You can have contextual ones, like I have values that are related to my career but not my marriage. I have values that are related to my marriage but not my health. Yeah. But there are 2 core values that are present everywhere. That took me 7 years to figure out what those were. And that was 7 years of very intentional, like self-work, coaching, learning, development. Yeah. And then to not only discover what they were, but put them through the test of time. Are these values true to me 5 years later? And so far they're holding up quite well. Yeah. So if you're sitting here listening, being like, yes, I hear people talk about values, I don't know what mine are yet. Cool. That's part of the journey, is the unfolding. You're not just going to wake up one day and someone knocks on your door and has this silver platter that says, here are your values. Like, this is what you should live by. Yeah. It is an act of uncovering and self-discovery that takes time. It can be sped up if you have the right tools and techniques and guidance. But give yourself a bit of patience and compassion to find them.
So I've been doing some work with a career coach, and I know I always say a good career coach is better than a therapist. Like, they can just really, they let you talk through your stuff. And for me, we were really trying to hone in on my personal brand and what I stand for. And so, start out talking about things, and it's more about the things that I do. And, it's like I'm passionate about career development and human development and social impact and stuff. But then it's like, okay, but what are the things driving that? And so then really pressing down into, I want to be a servant. I want to steward my privilege, because I understand that I am in a privileged position, not just as a white male, but also as someone living in Australia, and all these things like we talked about, all the things that we're grateful for. I have spices in my cupboard, I want to steward that in a way that, honours the people around me. But then it's also, how do I want people to experience me? Yes. And really digging down into that and, and getting clear on that stuff. And I was able to do that over a few week period, but that's been years of really sort of sitting with it and wrestling with it and living in ways that you're like, no, this isn't how I want to live my life and all that. So it takes a real journey, and lots of ups and downs along the way, but it comes back to that. Are you willing to introspect? Yes. Look back at yourself and think about, is this how I want to live my life, and where am I at with all of this, and then going outwards from that.
And as a tangible starting point for, if anyone's listening to this going, I think I do want to start being more intentional about uncovering my values, the way that you describe is a good starting point of like, just ask some prompt questions of yourself and write them down, just imperfect ones to start with. So how do I want to be remembered? What experience do I want to leave others with? You can look back on your life and go, what were the times where I felt most me and most fulfilled, and what times didn't? And you might notice some common trends there. And then you start to get this down and you go, okay, well, what matters to me? And you get answers down. The best thing you can do once you get that first level of answers down is then go, out of everything I could have written and everything that could have stood out to me, why those? Like, why is the most powerful question in self-discovery? So I sometimes joke with our team when I've been training our coaches at BU that my dream gold standard coaching session that I will ever do, I haven't done one yet in my career, my dream gold standard coaching session, I'll sit down with someone and I will say nothing for the entire session, but why? And they will solve it themselves. Yeah. That's the hope, right? Just silence, strategic silence, connection and compassion, and a genuine curiosity to go deeper, just shown through why. So start with that for yourself. Like, whatever answers come up, for you, you're like, I want to be someone of service. I want to just, okay, why? Why that out of everything? And eventually you'll start to just dig deeper and deeper. If you ask why 3, 4, 5 times, you'll start to get to a core or something.
Declan, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an awesome conversation. How can people find you and connect with you and work with you?
So many different ways. So on the social, all the social platforms and pipes, if you search Declan Edwards, BU, or That Happiness Guy, or if you want to follow our team, it's BU Happiness College. If you are an audio person, which I'm guessing you are if you're listening to this as a podcast, we have a podcast called How to Be Happy that we do weekly episodes all about the science and skills of happiness. And then other than that, if you go onto the website, buhappinesscollege.com, you'll find a bunch of free tools, resources, masterclasses and quizzes and scorecards, things that you can take to expand your skill sets of happiness.
Thanks for being on.
Mate, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Kinda Planned. Subscribe and send this episode to a friend that you think needs to hear it. Or head to my website, www.kindaplan.com.au for free resources, or follow me on LinkedIn and socials so that we can keep the conversation going. Now go unlock your next opportunity.